Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast of your favorite team in the Bay Area. And on today's episode, much like Whitney Houston, I believe the children are our future. Going to look at the Barracuda timeline for some of these guys and when we expect to see some of these Barracuda players in the NHL. So all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, JD Young, contributor at Fear the Fin and San Jose Hockey Now. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can subscribe on YouTube as well. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet, you might as well do it now. The season is here. We're going to be getting underway. We're going to be doing live, especially on the weekends. We're going to be doing live post-game reactions, all vibes, no analysis to talk about the Sharks. So make sure you guys are subscribing and hitting the notifications. That way you know whenever we go live, and you can maybe see my co-host Dakota in the background. So today's episode, we're going to be looking at some of the kind of timelines for some of these guys. You know, we get a lot of time, like, oh, when are we going to see Eklund? When are we going to see Bordeleau? When are we going to see some of these, Merkley back up on the Sharks? So kind of want to go through the Barracuda roster and give a realistic timeline of when these guys could be arriving on the Sharks at some point this season, or if it might be a future type of event for them. So before we do that, though, we do need to get caught up on a couple news items. We'll start with defenseman Scott Harrington being placed on waivers. He was placed on waivers Wednesday, so we'll know Thursday if he is claimed. I would be highly, highly surprised if he was claimed, especially since he was a PTO guy who was signed to a contract literally right before the season started. So this could just be a paper move for the Sharks to try to kind of start to free up some cap space and, be able to, when they need to bring back Marcus Nuvar and Alexander Barabanov, it's easier just to kind of send him, Scott Harrington, down when they need to do that. So Harrington is down. We'll see if the Sharks bring him back up or if they send him on the trip to Iowa with the Barracuda. So we'll know more. You'll probably, by the time you hear this, we'll probably know more about that, where Harrington ends up. Other news, Barabanov returned to practice. So he's close to returning. We'll see. I think they're going to see how he does on Thursday's practice to see if he is ready to make his debut on Friday night versus the Hurricanes, or if they wait until Saturday versus the Blackhawks. Or if not, next week when they start their their annual October East Coast trip, where they go against the Islanders and Rangers middle of the week next week. So we'll see when Barabanov. I'm guessing he'll probably be in the lineup on Friday night, especially if he's practicing now. They'll probably want to try to get him in on Friday night. So everything kind of seemed like everything was trending that way. So I would be a little shocked if he's not playing this, at least one game this weekend. So. And then some other news too. Dylan Hamelic was sent down to the Wichita Thunder in the ECHL. The former 2019 second round pick. This kind of might be the beginning of the end for him. I know he has 2 years left on his ELC, but it's just tough when you're a second round pick and this is 4 years after your draft year and you're still not at least hanging on into the AHL club. So I know he's talked about his confidence being an issue, but we'll see. Maybe he can go down, light it up, and kind of regain that confidence. But this pick is looking like it's not panning out. And at this point, I would be pretty surprised if he ever actually cracks the NHL, just because of, you don't see a lot of guys who play in the ECHL to make it to the Sharks or make it to the NHL. And then there's a lot of guys that he has to jump now. You think about that whole 2020 draft class that's in the AHL right now. And, I don't even know if he's going to be the first guy who's called up from the ECHL to the Sharks. You have Lewitzki, you have Mitchell Russell. So we'll see with Hamelic. who knows? Maybe he turns it around, but it's starting to look like it's just not going to be it for him, unfortunately. So, but we'll keep track of how he does and how the Thunder do this year, as we we'll have our normal kind of prospect milestone check-ins. I'm actually going to be writing a monthly article for Fear the Fin called "Keeping Up with the Pups." That'll actually be just about the prospects. So if you guys aren't reading my stuff on Fear the Fin, and you guys know how much I enjoy talking about the prospects, so just another place to catch my work on that. So let's go ahead and get started with the Barracuda. Some of the guys on the Barracuda, when we're going to go start with this. So we'll go in order that they have the roster, which is numerical, and then kind of work our way through the roster, starting with the forwards and then onto the defensemen and goalies. So start working through these guys here. So number 14, Jasper Weatherby. It's still going to be weird for me getting used to seeing Weatherby in 14, but he'll play. I think he'll play some NHL games this year. I could see him more of a kind of middle of the season, maybe some guys get hurt type of situation, or maybe after the trade deadline if the Sharks are active at the trade deadline and moving some players out. I wouldn't be surprised. I would be shocked, actually, if Weatherby doesn't get NHL games this year, especially since he played NHL games last year. I know the forward group is much deeper than it was last year, but Weatherby, I think he's going to be in one of those bounce back and forth type of guys. I expect him to play more AHL games than NHL games this year, but I would probably put the number right around. I'll go with like 20 NHL games this year, just because of injuries. He can play center. I know Bordeleau is probably ahead of him on the center pecking order right now, but Weatherby's a perfectly great, like he's a good fourth line center. So if like Nico Sturm gets hurt for a while, I could see them going to Weatherby first, other than Bordeleau, just because of you don't want to put Bordeleau on the fourth line. Well, Weatherby I think is more fitted for that type of role where he can come in and play that kind of hard checking, grinded out fourth line role. So next, speaking about Thomas Bordlow, number 17, Thomas Bordlow. I'm going to say Christmas. I think him and Eklund are going to be really close to the same thing. I've been pretty adamant about, I think the Sharks are going to struggle to score goals. They've scored 3 goals in 2 games. I know Nashville's a pretty solid team, but I think the Sharks are going to struggle to score goals. At some point, you're going to have to turn to these guys who help you create goals. And we've seen Bordeleau do that. He had 5 assists in his 8 games last year. I think he's going to go play on a really much improved Barracuda roster, and I think he's going to light it up down there especially if he's playing. Looks like he's going to be playing with Scott Reedy to start the season. So I love that combination of Reedy and Bordeleau, where Bordeleau can be creative. We know what Reedy can do in front of the crease, daze and confuse the goaltender and tap in greasy goals. So I really like that combination. I think Bordeleau is gonna light it up down there. I mean, we saw in his limited AHL games last year where he was just way better than the rest of the team. So the team's much better now, but I think Bordeleau is going to be down there. But I'm going to put him right around the Christmas call-up type of situation where he comes up and helps to solidify a team that's looking to solve some scoring issues. I think he ends up playing more NHL games than AHL games this year, but it'll be close. I could see him maybe dropping back down at some point in the middle of the season, but I'm going to hope that we see him for more NHL games than AHL games this year. So before we continue with the rest of the Barracudas and kind of look at their timeline, when we'll see them with the Sharks, do want to take a quick break, talk to you guys about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for football betting information this season. Find the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, in-depth articles, and analysis on every game you can find. As always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting, which is always really fun. Up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. With live betting, like I always just pick the Chiefs. If the Chiefs are down, just live bet the Chiefs, and you'll probably do okay. They're the fastest and easiest way to check in all your favorite games and events. You have Major League Baseball playoffs right now. good luck if you're trying to watch baseball playoffs as a fan. It is the most excruciating thing ever. Yes, you have MMA, you have boxing, golf, you have NBA starting up here soon. So head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, so we did Bordeleau. Next guy, Andrew Argazino, did pass through waivers, can go back up. We'll see. I think he could be, if he gets off to a hot start, or maybe one of the, like your Nietos, kind of one of those veteran forwards guys gets hurt. Maybe he gets called up. I think he's going to spend most of his time in the AHL. Not that you don't want to reward him, but I think he's going to be a key component to the Barracuda team. Having that veteran leadership, a guy who's been through a lot of different, he's played on a bunch of teams, played in the NHL, played in the AHL. And I think they want to try to kind of really make sure that they're working on their development, and having a guy like that around where these young guys can go up, if they need something, Argazino is going to be there for them. So I think he's going to, he might come up for a couple games here and there, but I think majority of his season is going to be down the AHL. So big jump from 26 to 52. Tristan Robbins, one of the last guys to hang on before getting sent down. I think he's going to kind of start in that third line center role for the Barracuda this season. And I think he gets a majority of the games in the AHL, but I could see him at the end of the season, maybe like the last week or two, call him up, see how he does in the NHL, and then you send him back down as the Barracuda are going into their playoff mode. But we'll see. Maybe if the Barracuda are fighting for a playoff spot, he doesn't get called up. So I can see a handful of games at the end of the season, but I think he spends the majority of his season in the AHL with the Barracuda, and I think he's going to be a key component for the Barracuda this year, especially if Tristan Robbins is your 3C and he's able to provide scoring that we know Robbins can do. That shows this depth of this Barracuda team that it just has not had before. So especially if you have right now, Bordeleau, I assume it's going to be Argazino is playing with Eklund, I believe. Bordeleau is your 2C, and then Robbins is your 3C. Whenever Bordeleau goes up, I assume Robbins will probably slide into that 2C type of role. So, which I think is a perfect role for him, where he's going to be able to play offense and help provide scoring for the Barracuda, and then continue to work on his defense. CJ Susace, I struggle with his name. Anyway, much like Argazino, he's probably going to be spending the majority of his time in the AHL. I could see him as, again, if somebody gets hurt, one of the veteran type of guys gets hurt, and he needs to come up and play a couple games here and there, and they don't want to rush one of these young guys. That type of situation. Again, if it's like a Matt Nieto, if it's like, one of those kind of veteran guys who kind of do a lot of the dirty work type of guys, that's kind of his role type of thing. So, but again, another veteran on the Barracuda to help kind of solidify is going to help add scoring to the Barracuda. So I think he's going to be down there. Scott Reedy, number 54. You missed my interview with Scott Reedy yesterday. Go check that out. Very good interview, if I do say so myself. But Reedy, again, going to be in that kind of Weatherby type role where I think maybe he gets out to a really hot start. We know how well he can score, and he can play center or right wing. It seems like he's playing more wing right now for the Sharks. But I think he can play center in a pinch type of situation. So maybe if he lights it up and Weatherby doesn't, he could slide into that third or fourth line, especially if there's an injury with, like a Nico Sturm or Nick Bonito, and they don't quite want to, throw Bordeleau into the fire. Again, having Reedy who can play those bottom 6 minutes, and then add some scoring punch down there. Or, we know how effective he is kind of in the greasy, ugly areas. He can, kind of slide in, especially if they want to play him on the power play, he can kind of do that as well. So I think mostly AHL games just because of the pecking order in his role. But he's gonna get some NHL games. I'll probably go about 25, 30 NHL games for him this year. I know he played more last year, but again, there's just so much more depth along the forward lines, and we know how much Greer wants to kind of make sure that these guys are ready to, when they're ready to play in the NHL, they're actually ready to play in the NHL. So they're not getting rushed through right now. All right, let's go some of these other guys pretty quickly here. Next would be Raska, Veal. I'm going to kind of throw these two guys together. I know Veal was up, played a game, but I think these guys are going to be mostly down in the Barracuda. Maybe a couple games here and there if you need to add some oomph to your lineup. But I think Veal over Raska for priority, I would say. But yeah, I think these guys are kind of AHL guys right now. So Brandon Coe, I know he was kind of thought as a dark horse. I think he spends most of his season down in the AHL, kind of maybe like a Robbins, where if he's had a really good season, they bring him up and try to reward him and see what he has. But I think he's going to be a big a core piece to this Barracuda team. I think he's going to kind of hit the ground running with them. And I know he's big. He moves really well, but I still think he needs to kind of learn to play. He's talked about this before, like learning to play with his frame before he kind of makes it to the NHL. So, he's actually only like 10 pounds heavier than William Eklund, even though he's a good 5 inches or 6 inches taller than, which is really funny. Anyway, so yeah, I think he's mostly in the AHL. Maybe if he has a great season, maybe a couple games up in the NHL at the end of the season, just to kind of reward him. So, the birthday boy, William Eklund, is his birthday as I'm recording this. Happy birthday, William. I think much like Bordeleau, Christmas time, I think is kind of the timeline. If he goes down and he just lights it up and proves that he's the guy. And again, if the Sharks need scoring, he's going to be able to help add scoring with his playmaking and his, passing and the way he handles the puck. So getting guys open. Again, I know they haven't looked as a center. I'd be shocked if he's playing. I think he's going to be playing wing, and then he's on the hurdle plan of let him play wing for a couple of years, fill out his body, and then you switch him over to center type of thing. So, Max Veranu, if he lights it up down there and he's scoring, we could see him up again. I think it's mostly AHL games for him, but we shall see. He's kind of a wild card with this team where, he proved that last year in the SHL, being the SHL MVP, scoring the way he did there, that he can score. The team is going to struggle to score goals. Maybe he gets a shot type of thing. So we'll see where he kind of goes. I still kind of think that they might lean towards one of the younger guys, but we shall see. Daniel Gushin. Ooh, it's a tough one. Dude can score. We've seen that. But I know he needs to kind of round out the rest of his games. So I think they try to hold him back a little bit this year. Maybe, again, kind of the same thing with the Robbins and Co. If he plays well, you reward him at the end of the season with some NHL games, see if he can stick there. But probably majority of his games in the AHL, let him develop, and then next year he is fighting for a roster spot. I would be shocked if he's not one of the top kind of 9 guys in next year's forward group. So Luke Johnson, Patrick McGrath, both guys are kind of like AHL. I think they're both on AHL only deals. Sorry if I get that wrong, but I'd be shocked if you see those guys in the NHL this year. Then Ozzy Weisblatt, I don't know. I honestly don't think he sees any NHL games this year. We haven't really seen his progress the way we've seen other guys. I know he's dealt with shoulder injury. I know the Prince Albert Raiders were really bad last year, but I want to see him kind of take that next step this year. So I think he stays down in the AHL all season. I think there's just too many guys coming in front of him right now. So before we get to the defensemen and the goalies and their timeline, let's take a quick break, let you guys know about Locked On NHL. Thank you guys, of course, for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can subscribe on YouTube. But make sure you guys go and check out Locked On NHL. They've got you covered 5 days a week with all the biggest stories in the NHL, especially now that we actually have real hockey now. So they're going to be covering all the big storylines. I'm sure we're going to hear very much about the Habs beating the Maple Leafs to start the season at some point. As Sharks fans, we should be really happy with that. Help get them the Habs out of the basement a little bit. And for my own health, with Scott and I, where we have a standing bet on who's going to have a better season between the Habs and the Sharks. And I think the Habs are going to win it. And I don't want to eat something disgusting on the internet. So we're rooting for the Habs for multiple reasons there. But go check out Locked On NHL. They got you covered 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Odyssey, and then on YouTube as well. So make sure you guys go subscribe over there. So the defenseman, Ryan Merkley. Whew. I think it's up to Merkley, to be honest. There's still a huge hole behind Erik Karlsson on the right side of just offensive defensemen who can play that spot, and especially on the power play. I mean, right now, Mario Ferraro and Matt Benning are running power play too. God bless them. And Ferraro leading the team in points right now with 2 points. Tells you all you need to know about the Sharks are at through 2 games right now. But I think it's up to Merkley. I wouldn't be surprised if they really kind of slow played him this year and really kind of let him gain his confidence and figure things out in the AHL, because he hasn't really had a good chance to do that, right? We look back the 2020 COVID season, a weird year. You're not even really getting to practice fully. Everything's done online in meetings, and that those protocols that they had to follow. And I understand and I appreciate the protocols they had to follow, but it's just tough for your development, right? Then last year had a great start to his AHL season. It was scoring at a really good rate, but then got called up to the Sharks because of, Erik Karlsson injuries and other injuries. And again, just maybe pushed a little bit too soon. So I wouldn't be surprised with the new management and the new coaching staff where they are just trying to, Oilers, if they're going to let it slow play and let him really kind of work out the stuff, especially because he's big questions on his next contract and what you do with Ryan Merkley going forward. So Artemi Kanizev, kind of the same thing. I think, he's definitely behind Merkley in the pecking order. I think he's going to have a monster season for the Barracuda and really going to be pushing for an NHL job potentially next year. But I want to see him dominate in the AHL and be that two-way defenseman that I think he can be. So I expect him fully in the AHL this year. If there's a rash of injuries, maybe he gets called up, but I think there's some other guys in front of him in the pecking order. Derek Pouliot, AHL only guy. Again, they'd have to give him an NHL contract if they wanted to do that. Nick Cicek, I think he plays NHL games this year. I think he plays a lot. He could be the new Jake Middleton, where he kind of comes out of nowhere and he's playing really good minutes and really key minutes. We already see that Quinn isn't really happy with Harrington. Matt Benning is probably getting overused a little bit. We'll see if Vlasic can continue. I know it's been 2 games, and if he can continue to play well. But I think Nick Cicek will get, I'm going to say 40 games in the NHL this year. And I think he's going to be a guy for the Sharks where he's going to come in, he's going to play competent defense. I don't think he's not going to light up the scoreboard offensively, but I think he can help to lock down a blue line right now that's definitely has tons of questions. Patrick Hallway, I believe also AHL deal. I would be shocked if he's in the NHL at any point this year. And then again, you'd have to give him an NHL contract. Santeri Hatakka, we'll see. I think Kanizev is, so if I had to go with the pecking order for the Barracuda defenseman, I think on who's going to be in the NHL next, I'm going to go Cicek. I'm going to go Merkley. I'm I'm going to go at Knyzhov, and then I'm going to go Hadaka next. So like of those 4. Again, good opportunity from this year. We saw bits and flashes of it last year, but I think with a much better team around him, better forwards, he's not going to do as much. I think we see a really solid season from Hadaka this year, but I think all AHL this year, unless there's a big rush of injuries. And then Montana Onyebuchi, AHL only deal. They'd have to give him an NHL deal to bring him up. Lastly, the goalies. I think we kind of know how this is going to work out here. Aaron Dell, I think he'll probably play a handful of games here and there, just because injuries. If Reimer gets hurt or gets traded at the trade deadline, or if Capo Kakinen gets hurt, Dell maybe plays a handful of games, but majority in the AHL. And then Makademi and Man, I would be shocked if they're in the NHL, just because that's why you brought in Aaron Dell, to kind of be that safety net for these guys, where you're not having to rush them out into the NHL before they're ready. We've seen this before with some of the Sharks goalies of the past who, at the end of the season, having to go out there and play games because they just didn't have anybody else, or they didn't want to play Martin Jones anymore because we were tired of watching Martin Jones, or they were actively tanking by putting out goaltenders who were not NHL caliber guys. Poor Josef Koronash, RIP to you. But so that's my timeline for these players. I think, again, majority of them going to be spending with the Barracuda. I think the Barracuda really want to be relevant and good again, and the Sharks, we'll see what they want to be. But having the Barracuda be good, having these guys actually go through a real year of development, John McCarthy, I think is going to be a great coach in getting, developing these guys and kind of helping these guys become professionals and not having to rush them. And I've talked about this before, of the follies of the Doug Wilson era. It's very easy to kind of rip on Doug Wilson for the contracts and stuff, but you're trying to win a cup. You have to make some of those deals. But I think one of his things was relying on these young guys to step in before they're ready. And that's one of the things I do like about Mike Grier is, yes, he had brought in a bunch of third and fourth line guys, but guess what? Now you don't have to ask these young guys to take a step before they're quite ready. And we will see Bordeleau and we will see Eklund in the NHL at some point this year, and because they're just too good and they're going to be better than the guys in front of them. And I know it's disappointing that we're not going to see them right away, but it will come and we will enjoy when they're there. Until then, we get to watch what's going to be a really fun Barracuda team. So I'm going to try to make sure that we spend some time, each week, if it's a segment or two, talking about the Barracuda, how these guys are doing, and, kind of maybe almost like a little stock up, stock down of some of these Barracuda guys. So that being said, that's going to do it for me today. Make sure you guys are following along Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Locked On Sharks. You can listen wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Odyssey, all those places. If you're on Apple, leave a 5-star review and leave a nice little review. Makes me feel good. If it's good, I'll read it on the air, give you a nice little shout out. So YouTube, subscribe there. Go check out my Scott Reedy interview. He's really good looking. I know it's weird to say, but yeah, it was a good interview. Got to talk to him about what a cake eater is and stuff. So go check out that. We're going to be doing more as we actually get into the regular schedule of games here. Going to be doing more stuff after the games on YouTube. That'll be like YouTube exclusive postcasts. So make sure you guys go check, subscribe there. You can follow me on Twitter at myfryhole. And yeah, be back tomorrow where we get you guys ready for the Canes and the Blackhawks this weekend. Going to be looking at kind of the lines for Sharks, Canes, Blackhawks, and then kind of the big questions heading to this weekend and what I'm looking for. So, be back tomorrow. Until then, bye, friends.